Hey all, welcome back to the neighborhood. It's your friendly neighborhood reviewer with InToIt Reviews. And these are my impressions of the TinHiFi T2 Plus. I was lucky enough to snag one of these guys up early, and let me tell you guys, I'm glad that I did. Because these guys are impressive at only $50 to $60. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into it. The TinHiFi T2 Plus is another TinHiFi T-Series IEM, and it does seem like there are a ton of them at this point. But this also is the least TinHiFi in the T-Series in my humble opinion, and it may also be what many consider the best. So before we even get into the build or anything like that, let's address the elephant in the room. These are basically a blonde BL03 clone, both in terms of looks and, it turns out, somewhat in sound. If you were asking me to describe what these sound like in a nutshell, I'd say that these sound almost identical to a BL03, but better executed in almost every respect. Unlike the BL03, the treble is well extended. And also unlike the BL03, the bass is rather restrained, as it does not bleed into the mids as profusely. I'd also say that there's a tinge more sub-bass representation in the T2 Plus as well. So if you're considering the T2 Plus, and you already own a BL03, you know basically what you'll be getting. And between the two IEMs, I'm most definitely going to be recommending the TinHiFi T2 Plus over the 03 for most people. And with that out of the way, let's talk about the build, and then get back into more specifics. The T2 Plus is comprised of what appears to be an anodized metal shell, which contains a single dynamic driver. The shape of the shell looks a little bit like a golf club, more specifically a driver. So could these become your daily driver? Just like the BL03, the stem of this unit is somewhat short, and the fit is rather shallow, and it may even be shallower than the 03. Because of a similar build, the BL03 had fit issues as well, and I suspect that the T2 Plus will run into similar issues as they get into more people's ears. Nevertheless, just like the BL03, these fit my ears pretty well. However, the back of the flat face of the unit does rest up against the concha of my ear. The fit is similar to a SimGot EN700 Pro in that way, almost like a hybrid between the SimGot and the 03. They come with a variety of clear silicone tips in duplicate, and one pair of white foams that started being packaged with the T3. The negative about the fit is that I do have to wear the IEM with the MMCX connector angled more forward than I would like to. So there needs to be about a finger's space between the top of my ear and the loop of the cable for it to feel comfortable. However, switching to other cables such as a TriPoWin cable or the T4 cable did help with this somewhat. Additionally, the angle of the nozzle is quite steep, and because of this, there needs to be a perfect angle that these need to achieve to sit in and hold the fit comfortably and maintain a proper seal. Nevertheless, after trying a bunch of tip options, I returned to the stocks for both sound and comfort, even if they were prone to slip somewhat over time with movement and either become somewhat uncomfortable or lose their seal. So now is probably a good time to talk about the cable. As I already alluded to, it initiates in MMCX connectors, and it appears to be comprised of a silver-plated copper and terminates in a 3.5mm TRS connection. I do think that TinHiFi missed an opportunity here to offer a 2.5mm balance cable with an unbalanced adapter instead. This is particularly a shame because this is perhaps the best TinHiFi cable in existence right now, even if it is somewhat floppy under the weight of the 3.5mm connector. Yes, I think it's better than the T3 cable and the T4 cable. The cable actually reminds me of the feel of a Moondrop Starfield cable, but thicker and braided better. It does not have the exact same braid as the T3 cable, but it does have one that is of equal quality. Having said that, the angle that the earhook created seated the IEM somewhat unnaturally in my ear, and I ultimately enjoyed the fit of a triple imbalance cable more. Another option was the fit with the T4 cable, which was also good. In summary, I'd say that the cable is great. It's like a Starfield cable and the T3 cable had a baby, but you might want to take out a hairdryer and adjust the angle of the aggressive hook if necessary for you to do so. In terms of sound specifics, the treble is somewhat forward, splashy, and on the brighter side of neutral with decent air to it. There have been some reports of sibilance in some units, but I have yet to hear any in mine. The treble does have a TinHiFi-like flair to it, and is on the drier side of things and somewhat thin. While the treble presentation is thicker than a T3, and not as dry as that IEM, it is thinner than the T4's presentation with less sharpness, sheen, and liquidity to it. While there is some treble intensity with the stock tips at times, which lends itself towards the perception of brittleness, especially during extended listening sessions, I never found that the treble region was harsh or strident to my ear. Of particular note, there is some mild treble grain, however, that I'm mostly willing to overlook due to the fact that this is a single dynamic driver and the rest of this IEM's presentation is generally very pleasing. Upper mids are forward, but some of the mid-range moving down towards the lower mid-range takes a backseat at times. For example, female vocals, guitars, and other stringed instruments were generally forward in the mix, while male vocals and horns like trumpets were recessed at times. One way to think of this is that the mid-range has a mild or shallow V-shaped presentation to it, but it is auditorily observable when shuffling from track to track. A gentler elevation from 1K like that found in the T4 frequency response would have been appreciated, but I do enjoy the mid-range presentation on most songs with the T2+. Another note is that the upper mid-range on the T4 is a bit heightened in comparison to the T2+ as well, giving it the sense of being more elevated. Detail and resolution are above average on the T2+, especially for a single dynamic in this price range, but it isn't earth-shattering either. There are more details in the treble domain than there are in the mid-range or in the bass regions. Transients also tend to resolve a bit too quickly as well, and are a weak point for this set. Peripheral details are good, however, while imaging is mostly decent across the board, and rather hi-fi-like in terms of its presentation, on certain busier tracks it does sound somewhat blob-like, and further, those blobs aren't exactly well defined. Separation is somewhat inconsistent, and occurs best in the treble areas, whereas the mid-range and the bass regions had worse differentiation. The stage has decent width to it, and is similar to the holographic stage of the BLO3, but stage height and depth are more limited than in something like a T4, with stage's depth being more restricted than its height in the T2+. Timbre is pointedly bright, moderately lean, somewhat dry, and at times brittle in nature, with tones presenting themselves with a slight auditorium-like resonance to them. Sonics can project a mild plate reverb-like quality when the upper regions are emphasized. There is significantly more of an airy presentation beginning in the upper mids and continuing into the treble than there is in other regions. In some ways, the timbre from the mid-range down is significantly warmer than the upper mid-range to the treble, and there is less reverb as the sounds transition downward. For a single dynamic unit, it sounds odd to say it, but it is somewhat multi-timbred. The bass presentation can vary greatly, and it is rather nuanced. At times it barely kicks in, while at other moments it thumps and almost rumbles, but never in an overly intense or fatiguing way. I would like more sub-bass presence, but there is less sub-bass roll-off and more even bass presentation here than in something like the Blonde BLO3. The sub-bass that is present does a good job of subtly enveloping the bass tones without bleeding offensively into the mids. There is good soothing bass texture here, but it is not the most layered, tight, or resolute low end. Instead, the bass does possess a somewhat diffuse quality to it. In comparison to the T4, the T2 Plus's bass is looser and has less sub-bass presence and impact, but it is also more evenly distributed and does possess the upper mid-bass presence that is notably missing in the music from the 90s on the T4. At $50 to $60, this IEM is a significant audiophile value, especially for those that enjoy a somewhat balanced presentation, a holographic soundstage, and an extended treble. This is the BL03 upgrade, both in looks and in sound. Plus, it's almost a complete package considering what's in the box, but like I said, TinHiFi missed an opportunity to include a balance cable this time, and the fit may also be suspect for some. Nevertheless, this is one of, if not the best value propositions under $50 right now, and while this may not replace my balanced T4 as my daily driver, I can see the masses preferring the sound of the newer T2 Plus. And just as a reminder to my subscribers, I'll be doing another COS KSC 75 giveaway at the 1K subscriber mark, so if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? It really helps the channel for manufacturers to know that I have your support, so make sure to subscribe now if you haven't already. You can also follow the channel on Twitter, the blog, on Instagram, or become a patron for only $1.50 a month. And after the 1.1K subscriber mark, patrons will get early access to blog reviews. I'll place a link to these neighborhood entry points in the description below, so make sure to check those out. And with that, I'm out for now.